Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Brian Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Brian are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Welcome, I'm Jason Smith and I'm your host. And we have a very esteemed guest today, Chris Woehrle. A friend of mine that it's been a number of years now, Chris, that you and I.
2018, I think I met you, or 2019, I met you at a mastermind collegium in Cleveland.
Nice memory. There you go. 6-7 years now. And so Chris he's got an unbelievable bio and teaches at Villanova Law School. Was the chair of Department of Tax and Estate Planning for the College of Financial Planning, has got a JD, and I don't even know what an LL.M is. It's something to do with taxation.
Yeah, it's a master's of the letters of the law in taxation. You can have a master's of law in some other disciplines like securities law and intellectual property, but those are sort of the big three. So it's like the crash course in the code.
Well, as Matt Damon would say in Good Will Hunting, you're wicked smart. So we're really grateful to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you for saying so. I certainly enjoy working with you and of course, Brother Dave Allison, who I connected with even before you. We've had a lot of fun doing the tax management journey, and people are always look at David and me about, I can't believe you guys enjoy doing this, and they'll walk away saying, wow, this is actually very entertaining as well as useful.
So what Chris we're referring to there is my business partner at Prosperity Capital Advisors and C2P, which is the group that helps financial advisors with training and development and financial and wealth management support all around the country. Chris and Dave Allison teach the tax management journey. So in addition to your Villanova Law School, Chris, tonight you're teaching a wealth management class.
I am. We're at week 4 of our 7-week mad dash through wealth management. And tonight we're going to be focusing on saving for higher education and also compensation planning strategies for executives. With emphasis on incentive stock options and the 83B election, which I'd like to tell my students on Professor Woehrle's Mount Rushmore of most important tax provisions. Three of them are the 83B election, because you do an unnatural thing to get a great result, and that is you agree to be taxed on something you don't have. But on the upside, when you do receive it, you survive your risk of forfeiture. What you have in a future appreciation will not be taxed as ordinary income. And then the other one is dealing with ESOPs. 10% of the workforce in America works at an ESOP. I'm always surprised at how high that number is.
Employee stock ownership plan. And I am familiar with the 83B. I've utilized that strategy a few times in my...
Good for you. And then net unrealized appreciation stock out to an ESOP. If you elect to be taxed now at the fair market value, then the future appreciation will be capital gain. That's a very good result. And then maybe the most unnatural one of them all, the gift of appreciated securities to charity. It's the only legal deduction I can see under the code where you get a deduction in an amount greater than what you paid for it. If I take deductions for amounts greater than what we actually paid for it, we take depreciation on something more than what we paid for a property, we go to jail. Charitable giving is encouraged through gifts of property.
Those are some more sophisticated strategies
Right.
that for sure play a role in wealth management as a whole. Chris, why don't we kind of start out with just talking a little bit about holistic wealth management,
Yeah.
right? At my firm, JL Smith, that's what we do, holistic wealth management. We teach the advisors at Prosperity Capital Advisors and C2P all around the country. You and Dave are a
Right.
huge part of that. And one of the most important pillars, which is tax planning and management, part of a holistic wealth management strategy. So I'd love to just hear in your words, Chris, like what's your definition of holistic wealth management and
Oh,
what and the importance of tax playing such a big role in it?
yeah. Well, for me, the holistic planning, it starts out with what purpose are you doing all this planning? That can be something very short term, like save enough money for a down payment on a home, but something bigger, what legacy you're leaving to your spouse or to your children or to your charities. And to be able to do that, you've got to survive retirement. You've got to get to retirement in good shape. And to get to retirement, you're going to navigate a wild ride through the workforce. There are going to be necessary or unsought disruptions in your labor income over time. So how are you acquiring the skills? So I sort of see the arc of, quote, holistic planning as really navigating a lot of risks. When you think about it, you've got mortality risks. You could live not long enough, or you could live too long. So if you don't live long enough, you want to have life insurance. If you live longer than the actuarial tables suggest, then long-term care or a second to die life insurance is part of trying to mitigate the risk of the sequence of returns for your surviving spouse. Most people, while they're working, don't realize their biggest asset is probably their ability to make money. And yet a lot of people don't take seriously enough disability income protection. When you don't necessarily think of your children as risks to your financial well-being, that's sort of, I can say this as a man who is married and doesn't have children because I got married later in life. But, as much as every parent wants the best for their children and they're willing to make great sacrifices so they go to the right school, there's a balancing act, because to the extent that you are saving for your kids' education, that may be putting your retirement at risk. And you might say, oh, well, my kids, they're going to take care of me. Well, let me throw a statistic out that should make people at least reconsider that. A quarter of all adult children are estranged from their parents for whatever reason. It doesn't even, to me, even matter what the reason is. It's like a huge warning shot that something can come up. You're not happy with your child's choice of spouse or how the kids are raised, or something can lead to a fissure. So all those years you were thinking, oh, my kid will take care of me when the time comes.
Yeah. Chris, it's funny, a couple things as you've been talking, I thought of, right? And surprisingly, the first thing I want to kind of lead with that you pulled out of the back of my head was a quote by Mike Tyson, right?
Okay.
Which is everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And the reason that came up for me, Chris, is I talked a little bit about holistic wealth management, right? And you talked a little bit about holistic planning. And really, what's the difference of holistic planning versus holistic management, right? Or wealth management, or doing the holistic planning versus doing the holistic wealth management. And I think really the difference in the two is a plan, right, is something you're planning for the expected, right? For the most part, you're planning for the expected. Management is how you handle the unexpected. And so they go hand in hand. They're so important.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you look at the P boards and the AICPA board's definition of the process or of the steps in financial planning, the most underappreciated is the ability to monitor and make adjustments. Right. You have no idea what the future is. Our ability to predict the future is very uncertain. I mean, I'm turning 67 this August, so I'm in a very reflective state of mind. And when I entered the workforce in 1982, most people who worked at larger companies had a defined benefit plan.
Yeah.
Most people who entered the workforce in 1982, they were coming into a world of very high inflation and very low growth. And it wasn't until the mid 80s things started to recover. And we've had a whole generation, maybe two generations of people who until recently have never known what high inflation is. I can remember high inflation. I bought my first home and I got prime plus one, and it was like 19%. And that's unsustainable. You knew you were hoping things would get lower, and then you'd refinance. So faxes were the cutting edge technology. Now we're waiting to see what artificial intelligence does in not only the decisions on how to invest, but on the follow-up monitoring and making corrections. So who knows what will be in 40 years? In 20 years, maybe we all have neural chips embedded in us to maybe make us more rational investors. The rational investor is sort of like the unicorn. I mean, I'm not sure how rational most investors are when they make decisions.
Well, Chris, one of the reasons that the bucket plan exists, which is a lot of people know about that book, and the philosophy, right, of time segmenting your money based on the purpose and the time horizon of when you're going to need to access those funds. It's for a lot of what you just referenced, which is to try to mitigate the irrational behavior, right? It's to buy a time horizon to give people the confidence and the peace of mind to stick with the plan, right? Because if your circumstances and your goals haven't changed, don't change the plan. We can make adjustments. That is management, right? That's wealth management. But make sure that you don't irrationally make knee-jerk decisions based on what the markets do.
And one of the things that I was very impressed about you and Dave and the bucket plan was, I thought it was very consistent with one of the major tenets of The Next Millionaire Next Door. And that book said about financial advisors, you're really in the business of behavior modification. And everyone likes working with investment advisors who get great returns. But a lot of that is ephemeral. You're going to have an investment policy statement or benchmarks to evaluate performance, but any person with even a sliver of sophistication is going to understand, look, they're going to be good years, they're going to be bad years, and a lot of the bad years are less than optimal years. They're going to be years everybody or most people are there. So what's the real value added in the advisor? And to me, it's setting up these systems so that your longer term savings is on autopilot. You're creating intermediate and rainy day funds so that when the sky seems to be falling, you're not getting excited, or when the markets are correcting as they inevitably do, you've got cash to run in and buy.
Yeah. Most things come down to confidence, right?
Yeah.
And confidence is so important. In order to have confidence, you have to have a written plan. But the written plan, as we were kind of saying before, it mostly is about the expected when the unexpected comes, right? When that punch in the face, like it's Mike Tyson, that's where the management comes in. And that's where you got to be able to make the adjustments as needed. But having that guide or that Sherpa, which is what the advisor's job and their role is, but to make sure you don't make a really bad move and fall off the mountain. You don't want to memorialize those downturns, right? Like the market's going to go up, the market's going to go down. The key is don't sell when it's down, right? Plan your funds accordingly.
Yeah, and some people like to have a year's worth of expenses on hand in cash. Others like to have a year's worth of expenses and maybe half a year, so that if there's some unanticipated crisis, and according to Alan Greenspan, every crisis is anticipated, you go in and recognize the value buying opportunities. But that's very hard for a lot of people. And the last few years, as I've been getting older, I do this as a focusing device. I've told Dave this, and be interested in how you react to it. And that is, every day I look at the actuarial tables. And for me, the reason I do that is it makes me ask the question, am I doing what I really want to do today or for this year? And because it's very sobering, even though there's tremendous longevity in my family. My mother lived to her mid-90s. My father nearly made it to 90. Once you get past 85, not a lot of people make it to 95. And not a lot make it to 90. So if 85 is sort of the number, every day I start subtracting, okay, 85 minus 66 in 10 months or whatever. And you've got to, circling back to how this all relates to planning, if you have a table and your goal is to have a $2 million in XYZ years, and you've sort of built in a 15-year term to get there, you've got to stay to the course. Everyone talks about the rule of 72 as a good way of how to frame your investing horizon. I also think there's a very valuable way to look at it for consumption. And that is the fact that you can buy something now has a longer term consequence. And what's your pleasure in really buying it? And I give this example to my students. When I was a much younger man, I always wanted to reach the day I could write a check and buy a Bentley with no financing, just buy the thing. And the day came I could do that. And as I was getting closer, I looked at the insurance. I thought, well, it's expensive. I thought that could be, but that could be manageable. But the thing that two things got my attention. One, if you own a Bentley, there's a real risk the car gets hijacked with you in it. I wasn't quite prepared for that. And the other is I sat down and said, okay, at the time I was like 62. I thought, okay, 7% return every 10 years, it doubles. That gets me to 82. I think I'll get at least 82. That Bentley became $1 million purchase. And I thought, well, how confident am I about predicting the future to say I might never need that million? Yeah. And although I thought I'll probably be okay, it's just I couldn't do it.
So, Chris, you know what you just made me think of? I gotta tell you the story. So, when my oldest daughter was born, I was 21 years old, and I named her middle name is Lexus.
Okay.
And the reason I named it Lexus is because at 21 years old, I had this vision that when she was 16 years old, I was going to buy her a brand new Lexus, right?
Oh, I thought you were going to say
21-year-old things, right? And so I don't think I've ever told this story. So I named her Lexus because I was like dead set. I'm going to be able to buy her a Lexus on her 16th birthday. Her 16th birthday comes, right? And she got what we referred to as Big Red, which is an old Yukon Denali with 200,000 miles on it, because no way was I going to buy her a Lexus, but I planned for that. And that was the vision. But then once I got there, it was like, really? There's no way I'm going to do that.
Yeah. And so planning is hard, and and to a certain degree, as the client has to at least be open to the idea of sticking to the plan. Because if your advisor, if she or he's really doing their job well, they're touching base with you at least several times a year. And saving is something that begins off the top of whatever you're earning. It's not what's left over after you're exhausted spending something. And I think it can be harder for people to
Yes.
understand.
And often in Chris, I think what I see a lot out there is our clients, we help them through the years of accumulation. And ultimately, they start preparing for distribution. And that's where that middle bucket, the soon bucket of the three buckets, now, soon, and later, that middle bucket, the soon bucket, is so crucial because it's that early phase of distribution. You've preserved a portion of the assets that you can confidently draw from with peace of mind and stability because you've taken some risk off the table that you've taken and you've earned a great rate of return, the later bucket money, and you've loaded up some money in the soon bucket to take you through that first phase. But what I find too often, and it's a good thing, right, is we put the plan in place. They plan on retiring, and they're going to have X amount of dollars, and they're going to spend X amount of dollars. And all of a sudden the time gets there and they're like, you know what, I'm enjoying working. I'm going to work a little bit longer. I'm going to work part-time, or going to teach some classes at Villanova or whatever.
Yeah. Well, most people think that they're going to work till 67, and yet half of all people are retired by 62. And most of the time it's not their choice. They lose their health. They have to care for a loved one, or they want to work, but no one wants to hire them. So to the extent you can find meaningful work, for me, I just used to keep a maniacal pace for decades, and it really hasn't been till the last few years. At least it's more manageable. I mean, I don't feel I'm racing in my head the way I always was doing. And actually, I have mixed emotions about that. There's part of me that did miss that just like all out intensity all the time. But I've had enough of my older friends pass on unexpectedly to realize I got intentionally geared down just a tad. I mean, I have my own office. I go in every day, literally every day, Saturday, Sunday. There are things I do, but it's not with the same maniacal focus that I've had.
And that kind of happened with me when my second set of twins was born, right? My 6-year-olds that are turning 7 next month. It was like, all right, the frantic pace, it has to slow down. But Chris, I could see you working for decades into
it could
in
be
some capacity.
Oh yeah,
so much knowledge to continue to share.
And one of the things is I'm always popular anytime a discussion of a tax bill in Congress occurs, in a social setting or other, because I'm privileged to work with Villanova with really sharp emerging professionals. I'm learning things from them too. The other love working with the advisors who go to tax management journey, because it's interesting to see what's rumbling out there in the jungle doing that. So I could, because I really don't regard it as work in maybe the way others think work. And the other thing that I'm still doing, I just had published my 51st peer-reviewed article, an article on private letter ruling on name, image, and likeness collectives. That's going to be appearing at the beginning of June, if it's not already online at wealthmanagement.com. And that really keeps me reading about new things. I'm doing the research for an article that I hope it will appear in October about digital autonomous organizations as a vehicle for charitable giving. There's not a lot written about that. So,
Chris, I mean, I think this is great. And we talk about the importance of like holistic health and how crucial it is. And I've seen it, and I know you've seen it. And over the last 25 years, how many people that were working full time, using their brain, using their body, like staying engaged, had a built-in social network, then they retire, and it's like comes to a screeching halt. And it's just not healthy. And you see their health decline, mental, physical, spiritual health from social engagement.
Yeah, no, the Japanese have a term for this. I can't pronounce it, so I'm not even going to attempt it. But the idea is you're dead within 1 year of retiring from work, because it's just such a culture shock doing that. And you do ponder your mortality. It's sort of a necessary thing to do. I mean, if you're not doing it, I think if something unfortunate heads your way unexpectedly, you're really not ready for it.
Chris, as we kind of land the plane here, give us a tip for the listeners from a tax planning management standpoint, which is such a crucial component of holistic wealth management. Like, give us a tip or two here over the next few minutes of what you feel like people need to make sure they're doing, no matter what, to prepare themselves for successful retirement and not pay too much in taxes.
I always like to be a cheerful skeptic of any conventional wisdom. And one of the pieces of conventional wisdom is defer the max into your 401k. And at first impression, that seems to make sense because you're maximizing the amount for retirement. You're deferring your rendezvous with the tax rascals until, for most people now, 73. So those are all good things. But you are also going to be a perpetual W-2 employee. And by that, I mean, you're always going to be taxed on whatever comes out as ordinary income. So maybe an alteration of the conventional wisdom could be defer to at least getting the maximum match from your employer. So rather than deferring the max to get the max match from your employer, it's going to be something less than the 401k max, and use the difference to begin tax diversification so that when you're getting to retirement, you're drawing out of a bucket that in effect has already been taxed. And as the infomercial says, wait, there's more, because a lot of the returns to capital from that bucket are going to be qualified dividends. So worst case scenario, 20% tax plus 3.8% net investment income tax. And for some people, maybe you're going to be in the lower bracket for capital gains, maybe 15%, maybe zero. That, I think, is not thought through enough. I mean, if you want to defer the max for whatever your reasons, good, but make sure you as the advisor giving your client informed consent, so to speak, so that they'll be in a good place.
Yeah, perfectly said, Chris. I think Ed Slott will often say what you just warned against, right? If defer all into pre-tax accounts, you're building a tax time bomb that eventually goes off on you in retirement or your spouse upon your passing or your kids when you're gone. And so diversification, take advantage of the free money, do the match, but make sure you're diversifying into the Roth, the HSAs, the cash value life insurance, that you can diversify your income stream from tax resources in retirement.
One of the risks in holistic financial planning I didn't mention, and that is legislative risk. Anytime our rascal friends in Congress are meeting, and I was asked the other day, do you think Congress would ever change the rules that currently exempt from taxation what goes into a Roth? And I said, I don't think they would directly do it, but they'll do something sneaky like what was currently being proposed, that if you've accumulated over a certain amount in your Roth, there's like an excise tax. And people would say, oh, that they'd never do that. And I'd say, well, I beg to differ, because back in the 1986 Tax Reform Act, if your benefit was deemed excessive, there was an excise tax, and they removed it before it really became operative and impactful. But every man or woman should shudder when Congress is in session. That's why I always like to say, if they could remove central air conditioning in DC, even for a few days of the year, that would be a substantial improvement to what would come out of Congress.
Excellent, Chris. We're going to end on that note. That was
very
fantastic.
Good.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for the time that you spent with us today.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.